All right, and we are back again, episode 41 of the Box to Box podcast. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jose Tejas. I am the primary host of this show. I have a very special guest, as I normally do for these episodes. I'll tee him up with a great intro here in just 1 second. But before we do, guys, if you haven't already done it, like the video down below, subscribe to the channel. We're growing. It's a free layer of support, and we really appreciate it. Now, as always, Box to Box, presented by Goals.tv. Goals TV, where you can find your free, unlimited, fan-made footy content today. We'll talk a little bit more later on in the show about the app that's coming very, very soon. All right. Now, with that said, let's on to our guest. This guy has a very, very special channel. I stumbled across it doing some very interesting footy research on myself, looking to improve how I think about my body, how I want to improve my personal game. Taylor Davidson from Football Entangled. Man, calling in from the West Coast today. How are you, my man?
Yeah, doing fantastic, Jose. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you again so much for being here. I know I keep saying it. I just think that your channel is addressing the game from a very unique lens, having conversations that I don't believe many football coaches, players, kind of anybody in between are really having. And that's why I'm so excited that you're here. We're going to dive into everything, your journey as a fan, as a player, where you feel like you're impacting the game today, your channel, of course. We'll get into all of that. But before we do, the audience already knows what's coming. This is the question, that I always start this show with. Taylor, who are you today?
Well, that answer changes on the day. Sometimes I'm a businessman. Sometimes I'm a footballer. Sometimes I'm a left back or a center back or a left mid, or whatever. Other times I'm an agent. Other times I am more or less just a man trying to help young and other developing or even guys older than me in the professional game get the best out of themselves and prevent any kind of sabotage and get themselves to where they want to be.
I love it, man. And that's a great summary. I think if you even wanted to summarize your channel that way, that's probably the best way you could do it. Getting players where they want to be. And I would even throw in using, I guess we could say in a very positive way, non-traditional methods that most people aren't talking about, really aren't promoting. I think it's just because you have a unique knowledge base that many aren't able to tap into. So we'll dive into all of it. But as we typically do on this show, I think I want to start at the very beginning, talk about your journey as a player, as a fan of this game. There aren't too many of us when you think about how big this country really is. And I think that your story is going to be very, very unique. So let's start the earliest days. So if you wouldn't mind, man, the earliest memories that you have of football, of the beautiful game, what were those, right? I mean, here in the States, it's such an interesting question to ask a fan. Were you always purely just a fan? When did you want to start picking up the ball and playing?
Well, growing up, actually, knowing my family had played soccer or football before, and everyone plays tennis. Everyone was on the beach, like surfing. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of forced to play tennis all my life growing up. And then there was one day on TV, there was this Arsenal Liverpool match, and this short little Russian guy scored like 4 goals, named Andrei Arshavin. Yeah. And he scored 4 goals, and from that point on, that was me. I was into soccer. I couldn't care less about tennis anymore. I was just like, I want to play soccer, Dad. And at first, all my aunts and uncles, grandpa, not very happy, but perseverance and passion, and they kind of saw it eventually. Yeah.
I love that, man. So you dropped the tennis racket for a pair of football cleats or boots. When did I'm really kind of curious, because I think it's interesting when a child in a family becomes a fan of something that is kind of niche in their family. Your parents didn't have any strong playing background or anything. So when did they kind of jump on board with you as a fan? Have they yet?
Yeah, I think there was a moment where I was about like 14 or 15 where there was one of those my team photos, like in the beginning of the season, and they just saw this huge, ginormous smile on my face with the ball in my hand, and from there on, my dad was like, okay, I get it,
Yeah.
And this is him.
Yeah, man, seriously. It's so unique to my own journey, just because I'm almost the exact opposite. Like generationally, football just kind of runs in our family, and the clubs that I support. You mentioned Arsenal. I'm a massive Arsenal fan, massive Barcelona fan, and the Barcelona fandom I had no choice. That's the one club that our family supports. And when I was born, it's like here they handed me a jersey, a kit. I was locked in. But you got to form that fandom on your own. So in the earliest days of you being a fan of this game, who were you really flocking to, either at the club level or maybe individual players?
I would have to say guys like Jack Wilshere, guys like Cesc Fabregas, Robin van Persie, Alex Song, Vermaelen, old center backs for Arsenal. These guys. I mean, like Abu Dhabi, all these guys. I mean, like Santi Cazorla is probably one of my favorite players of all time. Even though like I'm a tall guy, like center back guy, and he's like a short little like center mid. But anyways, and even someone like Per Mertesacker, you know,
yeah,
just a great
as slow as he is, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I know.
I love that, man. So big Arsenal guy, man. This is gonna be a great show. 100%. Yeah, man. I think you fell in love with Arsenal at a pretty decent time, right? I would say that this is probably like circa 2007 to 2011, 2012, somewhere around there.
2005, 6, 7, 8, yeah.
I love that, man. Awesome. So great time to be an Arsenal fan. You're coming up, even though your family was very much a tennis family. So at what point does the fandom start scaling into you wanting to go out there and not just play, but play competitively?
I would say the biggest moment in time is there was a day, I forget what day of the year, but I was about 13 years old and I was in the garage in the evening. Like in my garage, there was a place to kind of like use a wall to like pass the ball back and forth on. And I just kind of came to this like epiphany in my mind, like, okay, I want to do whatever is humanly possible to play in the English Premier League. And I kind of made like a promise to myself that I would do whatever it would take.
Yeah.
And from that point on, that's what I was doing. And everything in my life was kind of dictated in that direction.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? And I'm sure you knew back then, right? It's how difficult that path is going to be, not just on a path to pro, but on a path to arguably the biggest league in the world, where the beautiful game was born. I mean, it's such a lofty, ambitious goal. When you shared that goal with others and your family, your friends, whatever it may be, I'm just curious, what was some of that initial reaction?
Honestly, Jose, I never shared that with anybody, really. I mean, that was just something for me, and I knew other people wouldn't have this level of ambition. Even though like nowadays everyone says they want to be like a pro in the Champions League, but how much do they actually mean it? You know, not so much.
Yeah, because I mean, you can say whatever words you want, right? But I think the actions really dictate that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so when you said you wanted to play in the EPL, when you think about the work that you had to put in, what did that mean to you? What were you doing kind of week in and week out? Like describe to me just how difficult that path really was as a player. Well,
that's kind of where I guess the origin stories of the Football Entangled really started, where I became what I call the ultimate grinder, where I would just spend hours and hours in the garage or in the backyard just doing drills and just hours and hours of ball work, like 2 hours in the morning before school, waking up at like 6 a.m., like an hour after like team training in the evening. I just was like so bought into this idea of like hours, like put in more hours. And as most guys might know, over time, this shifted to where I realized, okay, I need to have more quality than just hours on the ball.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it has to, right? I think you have to go from, all right, it's not just doing the work. It's, like you said, the quality of the work that you're putting in. So for those who maybe are working, let's say there's an aspiring player listening in at this moment. For those who are still working harder, not smarter, kind of define what that means, right? How did the work that you're putting in transition over time and become more, not just effective, but efficient?
Well, the biggest thing is if I had simply gone and played indoor and gone and played like futsal instead of spending thousands of hours in my garage, I would have been like twice the player. Because that level of intensity you cannot replicate anywhere else. Playing like 5v5 on the concrete or on the turf like cage fields versus good players in your area. there's no other way to replicate that, and you can get so much more out of not like putting less in, because maybe over the scope of things there's less actual time on the court, but the quality and the intensity that you're reaching is way higher than anything anybody can do in the garage or the backyard.
I love that, man. And I think that you hear it all the time. You hear coaches say it all the time, right? I mean, how many coaches recommend that, teams or players go out and play indoor during the off season, right? When the season stops, find a way to keep getting touches to, even if you live in the cold northern states, go play indoor, go play futsal, whatever you have access to, go pursue those. But so many players, in my belief, and this was probably a case for, I would say 80 to 90% of players. When I was playing anyway, so many players are content with the 2 to 3 sessions they have a week for an hour and a half apiece, and that's really it. They feel like they have enough. They go to training 3 times a week. They play the games on the weekends, and the rest of it's just kind of allowing them to live a quote unquote balanced life, so to speak. What's the issue from your perspective with that mindset?
Well, I think even that word balanced is so convoluted nowadays, where they say, oh, like just in moderation. Well, like my mentality is like, just don't do things that are bad for you. Like they say, eat like candy in moderation, eat things in moderation. Well, just eat what's good for you and don't eat what's bad for you. It's like, it's not like more often than not, I see it as this kind of rationalization to keep these negative habits in their life. It's like, just if I watch one episode of a Netflix per week, or just one episode of, per night, versus just stop watching Netflix, and maybe you can spend time doing the things that actually matter and improve your life, that supposedly you tell yourself you want, but your actions don't follow that up.
Would you say that that's a weak mindset?
I would say it's a weak mindset undercover, where they kind of are shielding themselves from reality, because they're basically telling themselves these white lies that keep themselves in the same spot, kind of doing the same thing but under a different angle, even though it's the same results, right?
Yeah, seriously. And you know what, when you say this, I don't know if you heard of this recently. I think I saw something on Twitter about it a couple days ago, but apparently Kai Havertz for Chelsea has come out and said that he switched, his regimen to something extremely healthy and professional a few months ago, and somehow it's thrown off his game. He's now gone back to, the candy days and accumulating things in moderation, things that he used to have pretty regularly. He's got quite the sugar tooth, according to him. I don't know, if you were to come across an elite player with that type of mindset, they feel like they just kind of need it. I mean, how would you steer someone away? I'm personally kind of curious.
Well, yeah, actually, so I saw that post. I think I made something about that on my story, kind of like a comment on that as well. And so here's the thing. It's so first of all, the word healthy is also very convoluted, because define healthy. Some people will say it means being vegan. Some people will say it means some people will say that it means being carnivore, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's bodybuilder types where it's all about your calories and your macros. There's thousands of different opinions of what is healthy. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, obviously, we don't know exactly what this supposed dietitian is having or was having Kai Havertz do, but it's very likely that it was kind of a more of a mainstream calorie based fit your macros, and not really focus on the quality of food, and actually on the sourcing of food and the storage of food, which oftentimes I find is more important. Yeah. And also what time of day, what kind of foods are being eaten. So, which is also very important. So there's a lot of other factors in there that it gets tossed under this umbrella of healthy. Yeah. And so for him also, there was a great line from a guy named Tommy John, who always says a happy donut is better than a sad salad. And so there's this idea that like emotional context of the food you're eating has a big impact on how it's digested and how it actually affects your body. So like you could emotionally love salad and then eat salad and you'll get good results. But like you could emotionally hate salad and then eat salad because it's healthy, but then have bad results. So that's kind of like one more layer on top of that, where like obviously if like Kai Havertz has this huge negative connotation with whatever he's being told to eat, and on top of it, it's not really, in my perspective, not really healthy, then of course it'll affect his body for sure.
Yeah, it sounded like he really wasn't about it at all. It's like he tried something maybe a dietitian gave him. He gave it a few months just to say that he did it, and then he was waiting to kind of get back on whatever his old habits were, his old regiment was, and it's just like it reminds me of the whole Marshawn Lynch Skittles thing, right? Just having Skittles at halftime to keep you going, and I don't know. It's just really interesting, right? How I know I personally couldn't do that. I personally, as a player, couldn't really put many things into my body anywhere near game time or matches just because it's how I am. I don't like to have anything in my stomach. But I think everybody's so different. But anyway, I think we'll definitely touch on some of your philosophies around how players can think about their body and what they put into it and some of these things later on in the show. But going back to your come up as a player, I'm really kind of curious. We talked about, some of the beginning and the earliest memories of football. How did that scale into, and then this is more on the competitive front, how did that scale into, I guess what came first? Was it college soccer or your time overseas playing?
Yeah, so coming up, I played academy soccer here in California, like for West Coast FC, and then for Strikers Academy, and then also like for Nomads Academy down in San Diego. So I was there. In between those years in high school in the summers, I would go over to Europe and I would play in these like showcase tournaments over in Denmark, Sweden, Holland, trying to get like seen and get picked up and all that kind of stuff. And then after high school finished, I went to play in the Junior Allsvenskan, which is like the first division for the under 20s in Sweden. Okay. And so we were playing against all the big academies in Sweden that like their players were on like the U20 national team for Sweden and all that. I was there for about 6 months. Like a little bit more than like half a season. Okay. And then that team. So I was playing in like a smaller town in Sweden, and they like needed some help like for that season. And then I kind of moved on to going to Greece, and then I went to Greece. I had some trials at Panathinaikos, AEK Athens, like which are big clubs in Greece, and then I also played quite a bit at Kalithea, which is also in Athens, in the second division of Greek football. And so those were kind of my two big like stays in Europe in terms of soccer. And in Greece was where I fractured my foot. I had surgery in Greece. I came home, tried to rehab it for a few months, and that was my first kind of exploration into mainstream like physical therapy and seeing how it like what happens, how it goes through, what are the philosophies being used, what kind of paradigms are they under. And then I was kind of under a bit of pressure from my agent to get back to Greece like right away after the injury. And so I went back, kind of rushed my foot, and I refractured it. At the same time as the Greek government were having some big issues like with their finances, and so there was a lot of economic crisis over there. So my parents were like, "Okay, come home." Yeah. And that was when I started college soccer, and also, I mean, like had to rehab my foot again. And then actually fix the root cause of it and figure out, okay, why did it refracture? How can I do everything in my power to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, that's interesting. And we'll talk about, kind of the rehab process for this, the refracture of that foot. But I'm really kind of curious. I think there are plenty of people who want to better understand how the footballing or soccer culture differs between, not just between, the US and Europe, but even, between Sweden and Greece, right? Did you know, like, how much of a culture shock was there from that perspective when you got out there?
Oh, huge difference, man. In Sweden, the football is much more technical in terms of like people just it's more quiet. there's not as much physicality. It's much more based on like who can play the pass the best, who can dribble the best, and there's much less of this aggressiveness that's in like Greek football.
Mm-hmm.
And Greek football, like you see, I mean, most of the best Greek players that have played at the highest level, like usually are defenders or keepers, and so they have this kind of defensive like spirit in their play, and it's just kind of the big difference. And it's very, very, very like almost ugly in Greece in terms of how they play. But I guess like in 04, they did pretty well in the European Championship. So. But
yeah, 100%.
But that was a while
right?
ago. So
yeah, I mean, it worked though, right? They upset Portugal in the final. I mean, they did doing something right at some point.
Yeah,
I love it, man. Awesome. So, and you know, with that said, talking about the refracturing of your foot, coming back to the States, where was college soccer just an opportunity for you to keep playing, or did you see some opportunity and value on the academic side as well?
Well, obviously there's a big push from my parents to go to college. You know, at the time I was about 19 at the time. So, you know, I'm 19, no job. I probably should go to school.
Yeah.
And I was always good at school. Like never had a problem having good grades and all that. So I went to school, and also, I mean, it was a pathway to rebuild my career and get to like, and for example, get the D1 soccer in Europe and play, and then get my degree, play D1 soccer in America and get my degree, and like play at a decent level. Which, I mean, to be fair, I mean a lot of D1 programs are very comparable in their quality of play to a lot of teams in Europe, like at a like second, third division level.
Okay.
But America, like all the college programs have much better facilities because of the money from like football and basketball and stuff like that.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot, actually. We've had, you know, a coach or two on the show previously where, you know, they brought, you know, kids or players from the States over to Europe. And that's some of the first kind of, I mentioned culture shock before, right? That's some of the first things they notice, that the facilities are not quite the same. You know, they're much older. They work, everything works the same, right? It's just that, you know, it's, you can feel like maybe it's not the brand new equipment that you're typically used to when you go to a college campus. That's just one, I don't know, maybe a basketball title, or has seen some success in other sports, and that's translated to everybody, every athlete on campus benefiting.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. So walk me through how you went about deciding where you wanted to go.
Well, I mean, it was very simple. I mean, there was a local junior college in my area, just like half an hour or like 20 minutes from my house. I knew the coach there. I called him up. Can I get in? Yeah, no problem. Like, you're in. Okay. So it's just because, I mean, I could live at home like with my parents, and they could help me obviously like rehab from the surgery and everything.
Yeah.
And so I went there. I played a season, and then I transferred out to Cal State Fullerton the following spring after the fall season.
And how much of a jump up in quality and competitiveness was Cal State Fullerton?
Well, the funniest thing is my kind of story is like I went from being around Panathinaikos, which was like a Champions League, like Europa League team. And then I like went from there to a JC in California. Mm-hmm. So it was a big standard. And obviously I was very frustrated personally, because I'm like, what am I doing? I was just like in the locker room with guys who have played in the World Cup. And now I'm in the locker room with guys that like, you know, just not at that level. Yeah. And so that was a big culture shock, having to figure out, okay, at that level, like you have to play differently, because oftentimes it's a big thing that some guys don't get, is actually sometimes it's easier to play at a higher level because the players around you are better. The fields are better. The balls are better. Everything is better. And so you don't get kind of stuck into bad like situations. Like you don't get bad balls played to you. Everyone's talking, everyone's communicating. So oftentimes it can be easier to play at a higher level, but I mean, the caveat, obviously, like you have to be able to perform. Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you go to like a lower level, like a JC where the football is not very good, it's almost harder because you have to do more. You have to compensate for your teammates, and you have to do things that wouldn't happen at a higher level in terms of tactics and all that. But then going from that JC to Cal State Fullerton was also kind of like a big jump as well, because Cal State Fullerton is a school that is very prized on playing, and is kind of very different from most colleges in terms of how they play, and being very focused on keeping the ball, possession, opening the field, because Cal State Fullerton has one of the best stadiums in the country.
Yep.
And it's a huge field. Like the actual size of the grass is actually bigger than most fields in college, like wider and longer. So all that space, you have to use it.
100%. And I mean, a very competitive program, right? So you're making a big jump up. You mentioned, having to compensate for, I can imagine you would probably even at times feel like you were playing multiple positions at the same time, right? Just kind of doing whatever you can to make the ball work and to get the results. But jumping into Cal State Fullerton, that had to feel a little closer to not just where you were used to, but closer to where you wanted to be, right? So, and I know that just, I guess quick spoiler alert for anybody, right? This is where the injuries kind of, come back into play a little bit. But, what was the experience like, not just transferring over, but then getting acclimated to a bigger school, more students, higher quality players, that whole experience before you got to a point where you started creating content? Like, what was the Cal State Fullerton experience like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it was definitely nice being in a real program again, and kind of having the facilities around you, because when you play for a school like with a big stadium, it just feels different than like playing for a school like with a track field, So there's a different culture there for sure. It wasn't hard to adapt because it was what I wanted to do. I mean, I was there to play football, to play soccer, so that's what I wanted. And then, so something that the big thing is, even when I was playing at the JC and I like came back from my foot injury, I still was never the same. I had lost basically like a step in my speed. I like at the time I was so frustrated because of that, because I was at that level, but also I was so extremely frustrated that my body just didn't do what my brain was telling it to do. That I knew I could do it because I did it like a year ago in Europe, And so with that said, I had to even more lean into my intelligence and lean into my like tactical knowledge of the game to compensate for my lack of speed and power that I had lost from this foot injury. And as we'll cover later, we'll see how important the foot is for performance, and how the foot can almost dictate how all the muscles across the whole body work. But and then going to Fullerton, I still wasn't really playing anywhere near my best. My body still had so many issues, but I could make it happen just because I knew how to play soccer. I knew how to, play the game, and I was smart, and I had experience that most guys there would or didn't and will never have. So I had to compensate in that way. Like there were games for Fullerton in the playoffs where I would cramp up in the warm up in my hamstrings. Wow. And I'm like that shouldn't happen. Like I'm a young, healthy man who's playing like D1 athletics. Like why? This is not okay. And so that was one more thing in my journey where I'm like, okay, I need to fix this. And so like Fullerton was a big growth period because there's high expectations, high levels of care, and my body wasn't really following that, and I had to fix things and change things up all the time.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Like just to think about, you mentioned right, you're in the prime of your life. You're very athletic. I imagine you don't have any habits that are self-detriments to you, right? Like at least not in a really big way, not where it would impact your career. I mean, you hear about certain players, even pros, right, who if they're cramping up, it's because of their lifestyle off the pitch. But outside of that, like there's just, when you're in the prime of your life, there's very few things where a warm up could cause your body to be aching or feeling it in a way that just it shouldn't. So a huge growth period for you at Cal State Fullerton. Did these red flags that were slowly popping up with your body Was that kind of, in your mind, I wouldn't say the start of the end for your playing days, but the start of a transition into something closer to who you are today?
Well, I'm still playing. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm still playing. But yeah, so this kind of time at Fullerton was a really big evolution of myself, multiple levels of evolution. Because so like later on in my career at Fullerton, I had ACL tear, and so that was a big period where okay, now I'm out for a year. Now I'm out for 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. I'm missing this. I'm going to miss the fall season.
Yep.
I have to go back to the drawing board. I have to toss out everything that I thought was working because obviously it's not working. My body just collapsed under my own weight. No one pushed me. No one tackled me. My ACL tore on its own. That should never happen. You know, that should never happen to any human being. And nowadays it happens way too often. And so like you're mentioning, like the lifestyle stuff, you know, Cal State Fullerton was where I realized that maybe I need to be outside in the sun more often. Maybe being in my apartment playing Xbox or on the PC is not a good idea for me. And I mean, I'm sure, as you know, most soccer players have a habit of like playing FIFA. Of course we do. Like we love FIFA. Why not? I get it.
Yep.
I get it. Yep. I play FIFA I play FIFA for more hours than I care to count. Okay, I was a legend at the manager mode and doing all that stuff and like Ultimate Team and everything. And looking back, you know, if I had spent half that time just going for a walk in the sun outside and maybe doing some training that actually helped me become athletic, I could have had way different results.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you mentioned FIFA, it's such a cultural bridge for so many fans who come into this game. FIFA's opened the door to so many fans who never really watched soccer or football previously, and this is how they got brought into the game. But I think you made a good point right there. Habits are your lifestyle, your habits dictate how your body feels, not just how it looks. It dictates how it reacts situationally to whatever you're going through. So as you continue to keep playing and you start thinking on, you have this downtime now with your ACL tear, which I can only imagine you probably were driving yourself crazy at first. I know I would have been, but you have a little bit of downtime now. You're thinking about what your body needs to do to recover. Where do you start making the mental switch to like, okay, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to chalk everything I've known about traditional recovery and therapy for my body, and I'm going to start taking alternative approaches to recovery?
Yeah, good question, Jose. It's basically you always have to look at the actions. I always ask myself, okay, if I'm doing the same thing that I was doing before I got hurt, then I'm gonna get hurt again. So, like it's just as simple as that. And then from that kind of realization, that took me to having 40, 60, 80 tabs open on my phone, you know, thousands of videos on my YouTube watch later list, and going through every little last thing you can imagine, going deep into things that I would never have even thought about ever knowing about, and learning about it because I wanted every 0.1% improvement that I could get.
Yeah.
And if enough of those things added up to a 5-10% thing, then at the highest level, that can make the difference between playing in the championship and in the Premier League.
Yeah, details, right? It's all about the details. Like people think like, oh, getting 1% better doesn't mean anything. If you get 1% better every day, by the end of the year, you're over 300% better than you were the previous year. I mean, it's the only way you can really look at it. But you mentioned having a million tabs open on your phone, going down rabbit holes on the internet, kind of, you know, sort of rewiring your brain to think about how you treat your body and what habits you really go through. What are some, I imagine you did so much research and you learned a ton. What are some of those myths that you think players still believe today that you just kind of debunked on your own? Is there anything out there that you would maybe just kind of build some readily available advice around?
Yeah, we could be here for an hour about that one. So, I mean, just like one like story in my head that I keep thinking about is like, so I don't drink coffee. I don't think coffee is very great. I think coffee is a drug that is used to cover up poor lifestyle choices. But I never drank coffee anyways, like before I even came to that conclusion. But I was a junkie on chocolate. I love chocolate, and I was super into all these dark chocolates, and they're healthy for you, and they have the antioxidants, and they help you recover, and it's like better blood flow and that kind of stuff. And I literally had like 20 tabs open about every single thing about chocolate, and figuring out, okay, like how do they manufacture chocolate, and then you find out that there's like 12 different ways to like actually manufacture chocolate, and that each different way affects how the chocolate is absorbed into your body and what effects it has on you. So like those are examples of just crazy shit that I would be, excuse me, that I'd be reading about all the time.
Yeah.
And so obviously, like, to answer your question, I mean, I thought, long story short, I now stop eating chocolate. Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's like that's a great story for like an example, right? But even how something is made, I don't think players ever go that far. I know I didn't. Many players, we just rely on the advice that we're given, right? I remember, like, we talked about it off screen before the show started, but I remember watching your video on plyometrics and why there's so much misinformation on why and when we should be considering putting our body through plyometrics. So many players just do it as like a way to keep themselves in shape. You hear about like load management and things like that. And I don't know, like you get there's a lot of information, a lot of noise around the things that you can be doing to improve your balance, your power, your speed. And like we said before, right? The details matter. Even having that 1% advantage goes a long way. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, is there a piece of advice you would give to an aspiring player who is hearing all of this, maybe dealing with an injury? They've been told a million things by physical therapists or rehab specialists, and maybe they don't know who to listen to.
Well, you always want to listen to the person that's actually walking the walk, the one that's actually showcasing what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. So for me, I always kind of really got hung up on this idea of these like strength coaches in the gym creating programs for athletes when they themselves are not an athlete. And I know that will hurt some feelings, but the reason I say not an athlete is because lifting weights is not a sport. I know there's like I know that there is Olympic weightlifting and all that, but in my opinion, it's not a sport.
Yeah,
it's not a sport because you're not actually competing against someone else. Mm-hmm. There's no actual emotional intensity from a other human being, making it a reactive competition. And so these guys who are like ex bodybuilders, ex powerlifters, and they have like a few years of education under some kind of like body that gives them licenses to do like strength programs. To me, that is just so far from athletics. It's not athletics in its shape and form, in my opinion. The same goes for like physios. Like at my school, like we'd have a physio who, he's eating microwave burritos for lunch. And I'm like, how is this going to help me get healthy on the field? Like, I don't want to follow advice from this guy that can't rationally think that that's not a good idea. Because if he's making such terrible choices like that, then how is he going to, or then what is he going to do about my knee or my ankle or my back? That if he makes the wrong choice, I could go out and play and like push through the pain, and then it gets worse, and I have an injury, and I'm out for 5 months.
Yeah, I mean, even one bad piece of advice, right? And it's all it really takes for someone who already doesn't maybe have the best information around them for whatever reason, the quality of coaches, the accessibility to higher quality physios, or whatever the case may be. If you don't have those things, you're just listening to whatever somebody's telling you, and it could be flat out terrible advice, not because they don't know better, but because, like you said, they're not just talking the talk, they need to be able to walk the walk. So let's scale that up into where you are today. And, you started creating content in 2020 and kind of building a lot of strong messaging around a lot of the topics that you've already brought up on the show today. Was the motivation for the channel solely tied to your experiences as a player and making sure the next generation of players didn't have to deal with some of those setbacks? Or, I don't know, was it deeper than that? Are you just immensely passionate about debunking a lot of the misinformation that exists around some of this stuff?
Well, my mission is just to wake up the football world one player at a time. That's kind of my mission statement that I put out from day one. I wanted to revolutionize the football world and help guys individually, one by one, so that they could improve their careers and not have to go through the things that I went through, and not have to suffer and waste years of time and effort and money doing things that aren't actually helping them improve. Because I just went through so much suffering. Like there's no reason that every soccer player should have to do this, or any athlete of any sport. If you simply just work with nature, which is one of my terms, and just do the right things, basically, then you can get great results and you can have a great, fulfilling career as an athlete and actually enjoy the game. Because the reason that everyone got into playing soccer or playing basketball or whatever, any sport, is because you had fun when you were a kid, right? And so I want to help you keep having fun.
Yeah, and do it in nature, right? And do it outside and enjoy the aspects you enjoyed so much about it when you were a kid. Because if you're dealing with an injury and trying to rehab and get yourself back to where you were, that part, it's almost like you're forcing yourself to play, right? You're forcing yourself to kind of go through it because you know you need to. And if you're not, don't have a great sense of what good habits are outside of all this work you're putting in to get back on the pitch, it's even more difficult, right? Like if you mentioned before, still doing the same thing, still playing FIFA, still eating on the couch, still not going outside too often. Maybe you let your dogs out a few times a day, and that's really kind of it. So walk me through kind of just a little bit, just going an inch deeper on your philosophy. What are some of the core pillars of it, right? I've heard you reference a lot in your videos. Sunlight, massively important, right? Your diet, massively important. The habits that you have, you kind of work through on a day-to-day basis, massively important.
Yeah.
What are some of those core pillars of not just your channel, but your philosophy in general?
Well, first and foremost, go outside. That's the first direction I'll give anybody. Go outside, get barefoot, start actually feeling nature and feeling reality. And because anytime that I say the word nature, you can replace that word with reality, because that's what it is. Some people get turned off by the whole nature or whatever, but it's just reality. I mean, no matter what happens every day, the birds are chirping, the waves are coming in and out, and that's reality. Reality is not on a TV screen. It's not on your phone. It's not on Netflix. It's not in the gym either. It's not in the physio room. So that's kind of like my first area that I'll talk about. And my next area that I'll talk about is, okay, let's understand what is actual performance. What is the human body? How is it designed to work? Because for most of us coming up through normal education, our understanding of the human body is very outdated. Because it's very well known that any kind of information in textbooks in schools is about 20 to 30 years behind the most recent research in the field.
Yep.
And so, for example, most kids know the human body as that skeleton mannequin with the bar holding the skeleton up, and then all the teachers use that to, here's the clavicle, here's the ankle bone, here's the shin bone, here's the fibia. And then, okay, so then there's muscles here and there and here and there. And then so we're taught that all these muscles have names, that there's a hamstring and there's a glute and there's a quad. And then there's different muscles in the quad group. And so we're taught these names of muscles. But in reality, the brain does not know those names of muscles. The brain has no idea what these human scientists are talking about. The brain only knows movement patterns. And all those muscles just exist inside pockets of fascia, inside one fascial web. And for those that don't know, fascia basically is just a web-like tissue very spongy, that connects everything in our body. It wraps and interlaces around all muscles and neurons, bones, and organs, and your skin as well. I mean, even some people in the fascia world do include bone and skin in or under the umbrella of fascia.
Okay.
And so this paradigm is a big shift for most people, where to realize the body is not just muscle, and that you can't treat muscles directly, because that's going to affect the whole system indirectly, and that causes more issues down the line. I see most athletes in the physio room or in the gym entering this process of what I call whack-a-mole therapy, where basically there's a pain in your hip, so okay, let's fix that. So whack the mole. And then there's pain in your ankle over here, like one week later, okay, let's fix that. And so you go in circles, like a hamster on a wheel, just going in circles, wasting all this energy, and never actually taking a step back and looking at the whole body as one system and understanding, okay, why is that pain there? Because in our American medical system, we aren't taught to think this way, because it's not good for business. If you actually fix your illness and don't come back for the medication or surgeries, then the doctors don't make very much money. So that's just a reality of the normal healthcare system that has obviously spread into sports performance and like sports science, because just that mentality is how everyone is taught in the normal systems in college and the like.
Yeah, seriously. Everything is interconnected. And, you can hear that. And some people think whatever they want, right? Like, oh, but still, if my hammy's, if I'm feeling my hammy, it's my hammy, I got to deal with it. And it's like, sometimes I think opening up your mind, and which is, I feel like it's happening to me right now as we're having this conversation, opening up your mind and thinking about that, yes, we can make this pain go away today, but it's not just this. You're going to have to make more holistic changes to ensure it doesn't happen again, and to ensure that other components, whether they're other muscle groups, other parts of your body, aren't also, like you mentioned, indirectly affected. I think it's huge, man. Your channel seems like it's very educational, and the education's built around strong storytelling, because again, you're referencing all of this back to your experiences as a player, your experience working with other players. I know we're kind of getting close to time here, but just to kind of, one more question to kind of wrap all of this up. Is there, when you think about what's maybe this alludes a little bit to the future of the channel, when you think about all the players that you've seen, right? People that you maybe have coached to think a little bit the way that you think, what do you think is going to be, and this is probably a deeper question, what do you think is going to be the next, I feel like you're on the start of something. There's going to be some sort of evolution in how players are managed. And I think we're already kind of seeing it now. I mean, I can't think of a time in history when the player, kind of was in their quote unquote prime as long as they are today, right? You see some players lasting until 36, 37, 38. They're taking care of their bodies in a way that we've just never seen this layer of longevity before. I can't remember. I remember still when you got over 30, you were considered over the hill, and you were kind of on this downward trajectory for the rest of your career. Nowadays, 30, 31, 32 could be your prime. And depending on your position on the field, you have plenty of career ahead of you. Do you have a bold prediction on like maybe what's next in terms of like major developments on the physical side of the game and how players treat their bodies?
Well, I mean, personally, my viewpoint is that currently the football world is kind of in disarray.
Yeah.
And so I do agree with you that yes, there is this kind of longevity that we see superficially, because we have so much modern technology that can create, let's say, band-aid approaches to basically patch players up and keep them on the field for an extra 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
But those guys are the same guys that after they retired, they're just destroyed. And they have lots of serious issues, and they gain weight quite fast, and they end up having a big belly or something. But
it's crazy, actually, when you see some players, right? I mean, we've all seen pictures, but like, and certain players, I mean, even if they don't play for like a few months, you kind of see it. I remember seeing pictures of Eden Hazard or pictures of like Willian after like, Arsenal didn't play him for a few months, or Real Madrid didn't play Hazard for a few months, and like they come back from the offseason and you're like, dude, they look completely different. I mean, so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. But like, yeah, I understand completely what you're talking about. Like, you can see some of the changes, even if they don't keep their playing at a high level for a few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to agree with you in that there's a lot of this distinction between health and between performance. And I think in the mainstream, we kind of have this assumption that performance and health are going like this, and they're not helping each other. In my opinion, it's like, to me, that never made sense. Like, if your health isn't like, if your health is getting better, that means your performance is getting better. And if your performance somehow improves coming at the cost of your health, then is that actually performance? And so, in my opinion, in my perspective, and how I work with all my players, is health and performance is the same thing. Injuries and performance is the same thing. You have the same rehab program to either fix your injuries or prevent injuries or to get faster and stronger. It just depends on the intensity and the amount of reps and sets, whatever. And so I think players need to realize that ultimately it's their responsibility to do what's best for them, because the physios, the trainers, even the coaches don't have their best interests at mind, because when you're out injured, they will happily bring in a player to replace you. And I've seen that first happen to me. I've seen that happen to thousands of players. And I'm sure you've seen it at the pro level. I mean, the one thing for me that's very interesting is if you look at the stats of how many players are in squads at pro clubs nowadays versus 10, 20, 30 years ago. Because nowadays, like, you have like squad numbers of about 25, 30 players. You have like 211s plus extras.
Yeah.
In like 2004, when like Arsenal went like undefeated, I mean, I think the squad was like 15, 16, 17, 18 players.
Yeah.
And so that speaks to the resiliency of these players to play week in, week out and never miss a game.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Like, yeah, I mean, nobody ever measures the impact of the game and how it's changed over time physically. Of course, you can debate mentally as well. But, yeah, just even the size of the squads, right? I remember in college, I hear nowadays for some programs, I've heard as low as 20 players and as high as sometimes like a football team, like 60 players, right? Like, I'm like, how? Like, why recruit that many athletes? But maybe there's some sort of deeper underlying problem that we're not seeing. I don't really know, but I know times have changed dramatically on that front. And you're right. I don't think any coach or program will hesitate to replace you because it's just easier, maybe a better investment than trying to build you back up to where you once were. And maybe it's because, like you said, maybe they don't understand how to. Maybe they don't understand the best methods of doing so. So before we wrap up, Taylor, if anybody is dealing with, maybe there's a player out there who wants to learn a little bit more about your philosophy, how you approach the game, maybe they want to get in touch. Is there a best way to do that? Should they start with your channel first?
Well, there's a few different places you can go. Our YouTube, Football Entangled, has a lot of videos with a lot of like free information. Our Instagram has hundreds of hours of free content that you can go through until the night's over and just go through for hours. On my website, we have a like beginner course that just costs $5 that gives you like a sample workout to start doing and a bunch of lifestyle recommendations and like protocols and a lot of knowledge to help basically unbrainwash you from the mainstream, from the matrix, and get you thinking in a way that actually helps you and getting you to a place where you're actually making micro investments in yourself that will lead to long-term gain. That I hope every person here should be on the same path.
Yeah, they should. They should be aspiring to be if they're not on it, right? So
that's right.
I agree wholeheartedly, man. Ton of free content there. A way to, I think if you want to go, to the full 9 yards, right? There's probably a way to get in touch with Taylor there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of ways to change how you see the game and how your body physically approaches the game. Taylor, man, thank you so much for jumping on the pod today, man. I really appreciate it. I think there's so much value for any aspiring player, any aspiring coach, or just a footy fan in general who wants to be in better shape, love the way that they feel, love the way they approach life, to take from this episode. Guys, I'm going to link everything down below, the website, his YouTube channel, his social channels. Go follow them all down below. And again, if you feel like you do need some extra help Again, kind of unwiring your brain, so to speak, and putting you on the path to looking and feeling significantly better. Taylor Davidson's your guy. Taylor, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you stuck around to the end of the video, again, I will say it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel as we continue to push out more stories that are hopefully going to help us create a true culture around the beautiful game here in the States. From everybody here at Box to Box and at Goals TV, my name is Jose. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jose.